Black hotel worker saves a baby from choking in the restaurant, gets fired for disrupting service. The Lux Grand Hotel stood tall and proud in the heart of the city, its gleaming facade a testament to its prestigious status. Inside, the atmosphere was one of refined elegance, with plush carpets, sparkling chandeliers, and impeccably dressed staff moving about with purpose. The hotel's reputation for excellence was well known, and its adherence to strict service protocols was legendary. In the bustling kitchen of the hotel's five-star restaurant, Darius Walker adjusted his crisp white uniform and took a deep breath. At 32 years old, he had been working at the Lux Grand for 5 years, slowly climbing the ranks from dishwasher to waiter. Darius took great pride in his work, always striving to provide the best possible service to the hotel's discerning guests. Despite his dedication and skill, Darius often felt the weight of subtle racial biases and microaggressions from both guests and some colleagues. He had learned to brush off the occasional sideways glance or condescending tone, focusing instead on the job at hand. It wasn't easy, but Darius knew the importance of maintaining his composure and professionalism at all times. As he prepared to start his shift, Darius thought about his family waiting for him at home. His wife, Tanya, was pregnant with their second child, and their son, Marcus, was about to start kindergarten. The job at the Lux Grand was crucial for their financial stability, providing a steady income and much-needed health benefits. Darius felt the pressure of being the sole breadwinner, knowing that his family's future depended on his success at work. The demands of the job were intense, with long hours and high expectations. Darius often felt undervalued, his hard work and dedication going unnoticed by management. He had seen less experienced colleagues receive promotions and praise, while his own contributions were taken for granted. Still, he persevered, driven by his strong work ethic and the need to provide for his growing family. As Darius stepped into the restaurant, he could feel the energy in the air. Today was particularly busy, with several high-profile guests expected for lunch. The maitre d' approached him, looking slightly frazzled. "Darius, we're short-staffed today. I need you to cover sections 3 and 4. Can you handle it?" she asked, her tone leaving little room for refusal. "Of course," Darius replied, hiding his concern at the increased workload. "I'll make sure everything runs smoothly." With a nod, the maitre d' hurried off to attend to other matters. Darius surveyed his assigned sections, mentally preparing for the challenge ahead. He knew that even the slightest misstep could result in complaints from demanding guests or criticism from his superiors. As the lunch service began, Darius found himself juggling multiple tasks simultaneously. He gracefully maneuvered between tables, taking orders, delivering dishes, and ensuring that water glasses remained full. His warm smile never faltered, even when faced with impatient guests or complicated requests. At one table, a group of executives debated loudly over their business lunch, barely acknowledging Darius as he refilled their wine glasses. At another, a couple celebrating their anniversary requested a specific table arrangement, forcing Darius to quickly rearrange the setup while other guests waited to be seated. Throughout it all, Darius remained focused and efficient. He anticipated needs before they arose, remembering small details about regular guests and making newcomers feel welcome. His colleagues, noticing his skill under pressure, began to rely on him more heavily as the day progressed. As the afternoon wore on, the restaurant remained packed. Darius's feet ached, and his back was sore from carrying heavy trays, but he pushed through the discomfort. He knew that any sign of fatigue or frustration could be seen as weakness or incompetence, especially given the subtle prejudices he faced daily. Just when Darius thought he had everything under control, he noticed a commotion near the entrance. A well-dressed couple was being escorted to a prime table, their designer clothes and confident demeanor marking them as VIP guests. In their wake, a young nanny struggled with a high chair and diaper bag, a fussy baby balanced on her hip. Darius watched as the family was seated, noting the way the parents seemed more engrossed in their conversation than in their child. The nanny carefully placed the baby in the high chair, looking flustered as she tried to settle the infant while staying out of the way of the busy wait staff. With a sigh, Darius added the new table to his mental checklist. He knew that serving a family with a young child would require extra attention and patience, adding another layer of complexity to his already hectic day. But as always, he was determined to rise to the challenge and provide top-notch service to every guest in his section. As Darius approached the table with menus, he overheard snippets of the couple's conversation. They were discussing a major business deal, their voices low but intense. The baby, sensing the tension, began to fuss louder, causing nearby diners to glance over with looks of annoyance. Plastering on his most welcoming smile, Darius greeted the family. "Good afternoon and welcome to the Lux Grand. My name is Darius, and I'll be taking care of you today. Can I start you off with some drinks while you look over the menu?" The father barely looked up, waving his hand dismissively. "Just bring us your best bottle of champagne. And something to keep the kid quiet." Darius nodded, careful not to let his expression betray any reaction to the man's brusque manner. As he turned to fulfill the order, he caught the eye of the nanny, who looked apologetic and overwhelmed. With a subtle nod of understanding, Darius headed to the bar, his mind already racing with ways to ensure this table's needs were met without disrupting the rest of his section. The day continued at its frantic pace, with Darius moving swiftly between tables, balancing plates, and navigating the complex dynamics of the diverse clientele. Through it all, he remained vigilant, aware that any mistake could have serious consequences for his job and, by extension, his family's well-being. As the lunch rush began to wind down, Darius allowed himself a moment to catch his breath. He glanced around the restaurant, taking pride in the smooth operation he had helped maintain despite the challenges. Little did he know that his true test was yet to come, and the events that would unfold in the next few minutes would change the course of his life at the Lux Grand Hotel. As the afternoon wore on, Darius continued his efficient service, moving swiftly between tables. Just as Darius was about to move on to his next task, a flicker of movement caught his eye. He glanced towards the table where the well-dressed couple sat with their baby. The parents were engrossed in conversation, their heads bent close together as they discussed what appeared to be important business matters. The baby, left in the care of the young nanny, had been contentedly munching on small pieces of bread. But now, something was wrong. Darius watched as the infant's face began to turn red, tiny hands flailing in distress. The baby's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Darius's heart raced as he realized what was happening. The baby was choking. Without a second thought, Darius set down his tray and sprinted across the restaurant. He weaved between tables, his focus entirely on the struggling infant. The nanny, who had just noticed the baby's distress, looked up with panic in her eyes as Darius approached. "The baby's choking," Darius called out, his voice cutting through the ambient noise of the restaurant. The parents, startled by the commotion, looked up from their conversation. Their eyes widened in horror as they saw their child's face turning an alarming shade of purple. Darius reached the table in seconds. Without hesitation, he gently but firmly took the baby from the high chair. The mother half rose from her seat, her hand outstretched, but Darius was already in action. With calm precision, Darius positioned the infant face down along his forearm, supporting the baby's head with his hand. He delivered 5 quick back blows between the shoulder blades with the heel of his other hand. When this didn't dislodge the obstruction, Darius swiftly transitioned to the Heimlich maneuver for infants. He turned the baby face up on his forearm, supporting the head, and gave 5 quick chest thrusts with 2 fingers. The restaurant had fallen silent. Guests and staff alike watched in stunned silence as Darius worked to save the baby's life. The parents stood frozen, their faces a mixture of fear and helplessness. After what seemed like an eternity but was only a matter of seconds, the baby gave a small cough. Darius continued the chest thrusts, and suddenly, a piece of bread shot out of the infant's mouth. The baby took a huge, gasping breath, followed by a loud wail that echoed through the quiet restaurant. The sound of the baby's cry was like music to everyone's ears, a clear sign that the danger had passed. Darius cradled the baby, gently patting its back as it continued to cry. He turned to the parents, who stood there in shock, their faces pale. "Your baby is okay now," Darius said softly, holding out the infant to its mother. The mother snapped out of her daze and rushed forward, taking her child with trembling hands. She clutched the baby to her chest, tears streaming down her face as she checked her child over. The father, still visibly shaken, stepped towards Darius. His earlier dismissive attitude was gone, replaced by a look of profound gratitude. You saved our baby," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you." Darius nodded humbly. "I'm just glad I was here to help," he replied. The mother looked up from her child, her eyes meeting Darius's. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "You saved our little girl's life. We can never repay you for what you've done." As the reality of what had just happened sank in, the restaurant erupted in applause. Guests stood from their tables, clapping and cheering for Darius's quick thinking and heroic actions. The father reached out and grasped Darius's hand, shaking it vigorously. "I'm John Johnson," he said, his voice steadier now. "This is my wife, Sarah, and our daughter, Emily. What's your name?" "Darius Walker, sir," Darius replied, still somewhat overwhelmed by the situation. "Darius," John repeated, "you're a hero. If there's anything we can ever do for you, anything at all, please let us know." Sarah, still holding Emily close, nodded in agreement. "We owe you everything," she added, her eyes brimming with tears of relief and gratitude. The nanny, who had been watching the scene unfold with a mixture of horror and relief, stepped forward. "I'm so sorry," she began, her voice shaking. "I should have been watching her more closely." John held up a hand to stop her. "It's not your fault," he said firmly. "These things can happen in an instant. We're just thankful that Mr. Walker was here." As the initial shock began to wear off, other guests started to approach the table, offering their own words of praise and congratulations to Darius. He accepted their kind words graciously, all the while keeping an eye on the baby to ensure she was truly okay. Emily, now calm and breathing normally, looked up at Darius with wide, curious eyes. The color had returned to her cheeks, and she even managed a small smile. "May I?" Darius asked, gesturing towards Emily. Sarah nodded, carefully handing her daughter to him. Darius cradled Emily gently, smiling down at her. "Hello there, little one," he said softly. "You gave us quite a scare, didn't you?" Emily gurgled in response, reaching up to grab Darius's finger with her tiny hand. The simple gesture brought tears to Darius's eyes as the full weight of what had just happened hit him. John placed a hand on Darius's shoulder. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You acted so quickly, so decisively. Where did you learn to do that?" Darius handed Emily back to Sarah before answering. "I took a first aid course when my son was born," he explained. "I never thought I'd have to use it like this, but I'm glad I knew what to do." Sarah, who had been quiet up until now, spoke up. "Your son is very lucky to have you as a father," she said warmly. "And we're incredibly fortunate that you were here today." As the excitement began to die down, other staff members started to approach. They offered words of praise to Darius, clearly impressed by his quick thinking and bravery. Darius felt a mix of emotions: relief that the baby was safe, pride in his actions, and a growing sense of unease as he realized how much attention he had drawn to himself. In his experience, standing out wasn't always a good thing, especially in a place like the Lux Grand. Just as Darius was about to excuse himself to return to his duties, he saw Mr. Dawson, the restaurant manager, approaching with a stern expression on his face. Darius's heart sank. Despite the positive outcome, he knew that his actions had disrupted the carefully maintained atmosphere of the restaurant. As Mr. Dawson drew near, Darius straightened his posture and prepared himself for whatever was to come. He had saved a life today, and no matter what happened next, he knew he had done the right thing. John Johnson, noticing the manager's approach, stepped forward. "Are you in charge here?" he asked, his tone suddenly businesslike. "I hope you realize what an exceptional employee you have in Mr. Walker. He just saved our daughter's life." Mr. Dawson's expression remained impassive. "I see," he said coolly. "Mr. Walker, may I speak with you privately for a moment?" Darius nodded, his stomach churning with apprehension. As he followed Mr. Dawson away from the table, he could feel the eyes of the entire restaurant upon him. The Johnsons watched with concern, clearly sensing that something was amiss. As they reached a quiet corner of the restaurant, Mr. Dawson turned to face Darius. His expression was unreadable, but there was a hardness in his eyes that made Darius brace himself for what was to come. Mr. Dawson led Darius to a quiet corner of the restaurant, away from the curious eyes of the guests. His face was stern, his lips pressed into a thin line. Darius stood tall, his heart racing but his expression calm. "Darius," Mr. Dawson began, his voice low and cold, "what you did today was completely unacceptable." Darius blinked in surprise. "Sir, Mr. Dawson held up a hand, cutting him off. "You disrupted the entire dining room. You caused a scene. You touched a guest's child without permission. Do you have any idea how many protocols you violated?" Darius felt a chill run down his spine. He had expected praise, maybe even a commendation. This reaction was completely unexpected. "But sir," Darius said, struggling to keep his voice steady, "the baby was choking. I had to act quickly." Mr. Dawson's eyes narrowed. "That's not the point. We have procedures in place for emergencies. You should have alerted security or called for medical assistance. Instead, you took matters into your own hands and created chaos in my restaurant." Darius couldn't believe what he was hearing. He glanced over at the Johnsons' table, where the family was watching the interaction with concern. "Mr. Dawson," Darius said, trying to reason with his manager, "there wasn't time to follow protocol. The baby could have died." "That's not your concern," Mr. Dawson snapped. "Your job is to serve food and drinks, nothing more. You're not a hero, Darius. You're a waiter who overstepped his bounds." The words hit Darius like a physical blow. He felt a familiar ache in his chest, one he'd experienced many times before when faced with subtle and not so subtle racism. "I'm afraid I have no choice but to terminate your employment, effective immediately," Mr. Dawson said, his tone matter of fact. Darius felt the blood drain from his face. "You're firing me? For saving a baby's life?" "I'm firing you for disrupting service, violating multiple protocols, and damaging the image of this establishment," Mr. Dawson clarified. "We cater to a certain clientele here, Darius. They expect a particular atmosphere, a level of decorum. Your actions today shattered that illusion." Darius stood in stunned silence, his mind reeling. He thought about his pregnant wife, his son starting school, the bills piling up at home. How could he tell them he'd lost his job for doing what any decent human being would do? As the reality of the situation sank in, Darius felt a surge of anger. He knew, deep in his bones, that if he were white, this conversation would be going very differently. "Is it because I'm black?" Darius asked quietly, his voice trembling slightly. Mr. Dawson's eyes widened in faux shock. "Don't be ridiculous, Darius. This has nothing to do with your race. It's about maintaining the standards of this establishment." But Darius could see it in Mr. Dawson's eyes, the slight discomfort, the flicker of something unspoken. He'd seen that look too many times before. Before Darius could respond, he heard a commotion behind him. Mr. Johnson had approached, his face red with anger. "What's going on here?" Mr. Johnson demanded. "Why are you reprimanding this man? He just saved my daughter's life." Mr. Dawson's demeanor changed instantly, a placating smile appearing on his face. "Mr. Johnson, I assure you, we're simply discussing some internal matters. There's no need for concern." "Internal matters?" Mr. Johnson scoffed. "This man is a hero. He should be getting a raise, not a talking to." Darius felt a mix of gratitude and embarrassment. He appreciated Mr. Johnson's support, but he hated being the center of this kind of attention. "I apologize, Mr. Johnson, but I've just informed Darius that his employment here is terminated," Mr. Dawson said, his tone professionally detached. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Mr. Johnson exploded. "Terminated? Are you out of your mind?" he shouted, drawing the attention of nearby diners. "He saved my child's life, and you're firing him?" Mrs. Johnson hurried over, still holding Emily. "What's happening?" she asked, her eyes darting between the three men. Mr. Johnson turned to his wife, his face flushed with anger. "They're firing Darius for saving Emily." Mrs. Johnson gasped, instinctively clutching Emily closer. "That's insane," she said, her voice rising. How can you do this? Mr. Dawson looked increasingly uncomfortable. Please, let's not make a scene. This is an internal matter, Dash. Internal matter? Mr. Johnson interrupted. This became our business the moment this man saved our daughter. You can't do this. Darius stood silently, overwhelmed by the situation. He felt humiliated, angry, and deeply hurt. The Johnsons' outrage on his behalf was touching, but it didn't change the fact that he was losing his job, a job his family desperately needed. I'm sorry, but the decision has been made, Mr. Dawson said firmly. Darius, please collect your things and leave the premises immediately. Darius nodded numbly, unable to find words. He turned to walk away, his legs feeling like lead. Wait, Mrs. Johnson called out. She handed Emily to her husband and approached Darius. We can't let this happen. There must be something we can do. Darius gave her a sad smile. Thank you, ma'am, but it's done. I appreciate your concern. As Darius walked towards the staff area to collect his belongings, he could hear the Johnsons arguing loudly with Mr. Dawson. Their words faded as he entered the back room, the reality of his situation hitting him full force. He opened his locker, staring at the few personal items inside. A photo of Tanya and Marcus smiled back at him. How was he going to tell them? How were they going to manage? Darius felt a lump forming in his throat. He had always prided himself on his professionalism, on rising above the subtle prejudices he faced daily. But this, being fired for saving a child's life, felt like a crushing blow. As he changed out of his uniform for the last time, Darius couldn't shake the feeling that his race had played a role in Mr. Dawson's decision. Would a white employee have been fired for the same actions? The thought made his stomach churn. Darius emerged from the staff area, his personal belongings in a small bag. The restaurant had largely returned to normal, but he could see the Johnsons still engaged in a heated discussion with Mr. Dawson near the entrance. As Darius approached, Mr. Johnson broke away from the conversation and hurried over to him. Darius, this is unacceptable, Mr. Johnson said, his face flushed with anger. We're not going to let this stand. I'll call my lawyer. We'll fight this, Dash. Darius held up a hand, stopping Mr. Johnson mid-sentence. I appreciate that, sir, but it's not necessary. What's done is done. Mrs. Johnson joined them, Emily secure in her arms. Darius, please. You saved our daughter. Let us help you. Darius looked at the baby, now peacefully sleeping, unaware of the turmoil her near tragedy had caused. He felt a mix of emotions, pride in having saved her, bitterness at the consequences, and a deep, aching sadness. Thank you, truly, Darius said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I just want to go home now. I need to tell my family. The Johnsons exchanged a look of helpless frustration. Mr. Johnson reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Take this, he insisted, pressing the card into Darius's hand. Call me tomorrow. I mean it, Darius. We're not letting this go. Darius nodded, tucking the card into his pocket. He didn't have the heart to tell them that he doubted anything could be done. He'd seen this story play out too many times before. As Darius walked towards the exit, he could feel the eyes of the other staff on him. Some looked sympathetic, others averted their gaze. He held his head high, refusing to show how deeply this had affected him. Just before he reached the door, Darius heard Mr. Dawson's voice one last time. Darius? The manager called out. Darius turned, meeting Mr. Dawson's gaze. Don't forget to turn in your uniform and name tag before you leave. The coldness in Mr. Dawson's voice, the lack of any humanity or gratitude, was the final straw. Darius felt something break inside him. Without a word, he turned and walked out of the Lux Grand Hotel for the last time. The bright afternoon sunlight felt harsh on Darius's face as he stepped onto the sidewalk. The bustling city street was a stark contrast to the refined atmosphere of the hotel. People rushed by, oblivious to the life-altering moment Darius had just experienced. As he began the long walk home, Darius's mind raced. How would he tell Tanya? What would they do about their bills? How would they afford the medical care for their unborn child? The weight of these questions pressed down on him, making each step feel heavier than the last. But beneath the worry and fear, a spark of anger began to grow. Anger at the injustice of the situation, at the racism he knew had played a part in his dismissal, at a world that could punish a man for doing the right thing. Darius thought about his son, Marcus. What would he tell him? How could he explain that sometimes, no matter how hard you work or how right your actions are, the world can still be unfair? As he walked, Darius's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from Tanya. "How's your day going, honey? Can't wait to see you tonight." Darius stared at the message, his vision blurring with unshed tears. He couldn't bring himself to respond, not yet. How could he shatter her world with a text message? The long walk home gave Darius time to process what had happened. By the time he reached his apartment building, the initial shock had worn off, replaced by a mix of determination and resignation. He knew the road ahead would be tough, but he also knew he had done the right thing. No job was worth a child's life. As Darius climbed the stairs to his apartment, he steeled himself for the conversation ahead. He had no idea what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He would face it with the same courage and integrity that had led him to save Emily's life, regardless of the consequences. With a deep breath, Darius opened the door to his apartment, ready to face whatever came next. The following morning, John and Sarah Johnson arrived at the Lux Grand Hotel with a sense of purpose. Their daughter, Emily, safely nestled in her stroller, gurgled happily, oblivious to the tension surrounding her parents. As they strode through the opulent lobby, heads turned. The Johnsons were well known in certain circles, and their determined expressions hinted at trouble. They approached the front desk, where a polite young woman greeted them with a practiced smile. "Good morning. Welcome to the Lux Grand. How may I assist you today?" John leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "We need to speak with Ms. Evelyn Wright immediately. It's urgent." The receptionist's smile faltered slightly. "I'm afraid Ms. Wright is very busy. Perhaps I could schedule an appointment for later this week?" Sarah stepped forward, Emily in her arms. "This can't wait," she said, her voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "A grave injustice occurred in this hotel yesterday, and we demand it be addressed now." The receptionist looked uncertain, her eyes darting between the Johnsons and her computer screen. "Let me see what I can do," she said finally, reaching for the phone. After a hushed conversation, the receptionist looked up. "Ms. Wright can spare a few minutes. Please, follow me." The Johnsons were led to an elevator and up to the top floor of the hotel. They emerged into a tastefully decorated corridor that led to a set of imposing double doors. The receptionist knocked softly, then opened the door. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson to see you, Ms. Wright." Evelyn Wright sat behind a large mahogany desk, her steel-gray hair perfectly coiffed, her suit impeccable. She looked up from her computer, her expression a mixture of curiosity and annoyance. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson," she said, rising to greet them. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" John stepped forward, his jaw set. "Ms. Wright, we're here about an incident that occurred in your restaurant yesterday. An incident that ended with a heroic employee being unjustly fired." Ms. Wright's eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. Please, have a seat and tell me more." As the Johnsons settled into the plush chairs opposite Ms. Wright's desk, Sarah cradling Emily, John launched into their story. He recounted the events of the previous day. Their lunch, Emily choking, and Darius's swift, life-saving action. His voice grew heated as he described Mr. Dawson's reaction and Darius's subsequent firing. "This man saved our daughter's life," John concluded, his voice tight with emotion. "And your manager fired him for it. It's unconscionable." Ms. Wright listened impassively, her fingers steepled under her chin. When John finished, she leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention," she said carefully. "However, I'm sure Mr. Dawson had his reasons. We have strict protocols in place for emergencies and dash." Sarah interrupted, her eyes flashing. "Protocols? Our baby was choking. There wasn't time for protocols. Darius acted on instinct, and because of that, our Emily is alive today." Ms. Wright's gaze shifted to the baby in Sarah's arms. For a moment, her professional facade cracked, revealing a flicker of empathy. "I understand this is an emotional situation for you," Ms. Wright said, her tone softening slightly. "But I can't simply overturn a manager's decision without proper investigation." John leaned forward, his voice low and intense. Then investigate. Review your security footage. Talk to your staff and other guests who were there. You'll see that Darius did nothing wrong. In fact, he went above and beyond his duties. Ms. Wright was silent for a moment, her eyes moving between the Johnsons and baby Emily. Finally, she nodded. Very well. I'll look into this matter personally, but I can't promise anything. That's all we ask, John said, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Thank you, Ms. Wright. As the Johnsons left her office, Ms. Wright buzzed her assistant. Get me the security footage from the restaurant yesterday, and I want to speak with Mr. Dawson and any staff who witnessed the incident. Over the next few hours, Ms. Wright immersed herself in the investigation. She started with the security footage, watching the events unfold on her computer screen. The video showed Darius moving efficiently between tables, his demeanor professional and attentive. Then came the crucial moment, Darius noticing the baby in distress, his sprint across the restaurant, the life-saving maneuver. Ms. Wright watched it several times, her frown deepening with each viewing. She could see no fault in Darius's actions. If anything, his quick thinking and skill were impressive. Then she focused on the aftermath. She observed Mr. Dawson's approach, his body language hostile even before he spoke to Darius. The racial undertones were subtle but unmistakable. The way Mr. Dawson positioned himself, the dismissive gestures, the clear power dynamic at play. Ms. Wright sighed heavily, pinching the bridge of her nose. This was not good. Next, she called in members of the restaurant staff who had been present during the incident. One by one, they recounted what they had seen. A young waitress spoke of Darius's everyday kindness and professionalism. He's always the first to help out when we're swamped, she said. I've never seen him lose his cool, even with difficult customers. A busboy described the moment Darius saved Emily. It was like time stood still, he said. 1 second the baby was choking, the next Darius was there, saving her life. It was amazing. Several staff members expressed their shock at Darius's firing. It doesn't make sense, one said. If it had been anyone else, they'd probably have gotten a raise, not fired. As the day wore on, a pattern emerged. The more Ms. Wright learned, the clearer it became that Darius's firing was not just unjust, but potentially discriminatory. Finally, Ms. Wright called Mr. Dawson into her office. He entered with his usual air of confidence, but it quickly faded under Ms. Wright's stern gaze. Explain to me, she said, her voice cold, why you thought it appropriate to fire an employee for saving a child's life. Mr. Dawson shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Wright, it wasn't about saving the child. It was about maintaining order in the restaurant. Darius caused a scene, disrupted service. He prevented a tragedy, Ms. Wright interrupted. I've reviewed the footage, Mr. Dawson. Darius acted swiftly and professionally. The only disruption I saw was your overreaction. Mr. Dawson's face flushed. But the protocols. Sometimes, Mr. Dawson, human life takes precedence over protocols, Ms. Wright said sharply. But I suspect this isn't really about protocols, is it? Mr. Dawson fell silent, his eyes darting away from Ms. Wright's piercing gaze. I've spoken with the staff, Ms. Wright continued. This isn't the first time your treatment of Darius has raised eyebrows. Would you have reacted the same way if it had been one of our white employees who saved that child? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Mr. Dawson opened his mouth, then closed it again, unable to formulate a response. Ms. Wright leaned back in her chair, her expression grave. Mr. Dawson, I'm deeply disappointed. The Lux Grand prides itself on excellence in all areas, including how we treat our staff. Your actions yesterday fell far short of our standards. Mr. Dawson's shoulders slumped. What happens now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ms. Wright's voice was firm. For now, you're suspended pending a full review of your conduct. As for Darius, I intend to rectify this situation immediately. As Mr. Dawson left her office, looking shell-shocked, Ms. Wright turned to her computer. She had one more task to complete before she could close this unfortunate chapter. She pulled up Darius's employee file, noting his exemplary record and consistent positive feedback from guests. Then she reached for her phone, dialing the number listed in his contact information. Ms. Wright picked up her phone and dialed Darius's number. Her heart raced as she waited for him to answer. After several rings, Darius's deep voice came through. "Hello? Mr. Walker? This is Evelyn Wright, owner of the Lux Grand Hotel. Do you have a moment to talk about yesterday's events?" There was a pause before Darius replied, "Yes, ma'am." Ms. Wright took a deep breath. "Mr. Walker, I owe you an apology. I've looked into what happened, and I want to make things right." She explained her investigation and findings. As she spoke, she heard Darius's breathing change, sensing his mix of emotions. "Your actions were heroic, Mr. Walker. You saved that child's life. You shouldn't have been punished for it. I want to offer you your job back, with a promotion to head waiter. I also want to address the racial issues in our hotel. This incident showed me we have serious problems to fix." Darius was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was guarded. "I appreciate the offer, Ms. Wright, but I'm not sure I can come back after what happened." "I understand," Ms. Wright said. "You were treated terribly, but I hope you'll consider it. We need people like you here, people of integrity who do the right thing. I promise things will be different." "I need time to think about it," Darius said. "Of course," Ms. Wright replied. "Please take all the time you need. And know that whatever you decide, I'm truly sorry for what you went through." After hanging up, Darius sat on his couch, mind racing. The call from Ms. Wright had shocked him. He hadn't expected the owner to reach out, let alone offer him his job back. Part of him wanted to accept right away. The job paid well, and with a baby on the way, his family needed the money. But another part of him still felt the sting of injustice. Could he really go back to a place where he'd been treated so unfairly? Darius thought about the Johnsons and their support. Their gratitude had meant so much to him. He remembered little Emily's face, how it felt to save her life. Despite everything, there had been good in that moment. He called Tanya into the living room and told her about Ms. Wright's offer. "What do you think I should do?" he asked. Tanya took his hand. "Only you can decide, baby, but I think you should consider it. You loved that job before this happened, and it sounds like they want to make real changes." Darius nodded slowly. "You're right, but I'm scared it'll happen again, that nothing will really change." "Then make sure it does change," Tanya said firmly. "Tell them what you need to feel safe there. Make them earn your trust back." Darius thought about her words. She was right. If he went back, he could push for real change. He could be a voice for other workers facing discrimination. The next day, Darius called Ms. Wright back. "I've thought about your offer," he said. "I'm willing to come back, but I have conditions." "Of course," Ms. Wright said. "What do you need?" "First, I want Mr. Dawson held accountable for his actions. Second, I want the hotel to create a clear anti-discrimination policy and provide training for all staff. And third, I want to be part of making these changes happen." Ms. Wright didn't hesitate. "Agreed on all counts. We need your voice and experience to make real improvements. Thank you for giving us this chance, Mr. Walker." Darius felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "Thank you for listening, Ms. Wright. I look forward to working with you to make the Lux Grand better for everyone." After hanging up, Ms. Wright called Mr. Dawson into her office. He entered looking nervous, clearly sensing something was wrong. "Sit down, Mr. Dawson," Ms. Wright said, her voice stern. Mr. Dawson sank into a chair, his face pale. "I've reviewed the incident with Mr. Walker," Ms. Wright began. "Your handling of the situation was completely unacceptable. You showed poor judgment and clear racial bias in your decision-making." Mr. Dawson opened his mouth to speak, but Ms. Wright held up a hand to stop him. "I'm not finished," she said sharply. "Your actions nearly cost this hotel a valuable employee and put us at risk of a discrimination lawsuit. More importantly, you punished a man for saving a child's life. That goes against everything we should stand for as a business and as human beings." Mr. Dawson's shoulders slumped. "I understand, Ms. Wright. What happens now?" "Effective immediately, you are demoted from restaurant manager to assistant manager. You'll be on probation for the next 6 months. During that time, you'll undergo extensive training on racial sensitivity and proper management practices." Mr. Dawson nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "Let me be very clear," Ms. Wright continued. "This is your last chance. If I see any hint of racial bias or poor judgment in your work going forward, you will be terminated. Do you understand? Yes, Ms. Wright, Mr. Dawson said quietly. I understand. Good, Ms. Wright said. You're dismissed. I expect to see major improvements in your work, starting today. As Mr. Dawson left her office, Ms. Wright sighed heavily. She knew demoting him wasn't enough to solve the hotel's problems. There was so much work to be done. Over the next few weeks, Ms. Wright worked closely with Darius and other staff members to create a comprehensive anti-discrimination policy. They set up mandatory training sessions for all employees, focusing on racial sensitivity and proper handling of emergency situations. Darius threw himself into the work, helping to design training materials and sharing his experiences with other staff. He was determined to turn his painful experience into something positive for the hotel and its workers. The changes weren't easy. Some longtime employees resisted the new policies, uncomfortable with discussions about race and privilege. But Ms. Wright stood firm, making it clear that embracing diversity and treating all people with respect was non-negotiable. As the weeks passed, Darius began to see real improvements. Staff members of all races seemed more comfortable working together. Guests commented on the positive atmosphere in the hotel. And when a minor emergency arose in the restaurant, a guest having an allergic reaction, staff responded quickly and professionally without fear of repercussions. One afternoon, as Darius finished his shift, he saw Mr. Dawson approaching. He tensed, unsure what to expect. Mr. Walker, Mr. Dawson said, his voice hesitant, I owe you an apology. My actions that day were inexcusable. I let my biases cloud my judgment, and I hurt you deeply in the process. I'm truly sorry. Darius studied the man's face, seeing genuine remorse there. Thank you for saying that, Mr. Dawson. I appreciate it. Mr. Dawson nodded. I want you to know I'm committed to doing better. The training has opened my eyes to a lot of things I never understood before. I hope that in time, I can earn back your trust and the trust of the whole staff. That means a lot, Darius said. It won't be easy, but I believe people can change. I'm willing to give you that chance. As Mr. Dawson walked away, Darius felt a sense of hope. Real change was happening at the Lux Grand, and he was part of making it happen. Later that week, Darius received a surprise visit from the Johnsons. They had heard about the changes at the hotel and wanted to see him. We're so glad you're back, Mrs. Johnson said, holding little Emily. This place needs people like you. Mr. Johnson nodded in agreement. We wanted to thank you again for what you did, and to let you know we're impressed with how the hotel has responded. We've told all our friends about the positive changes here. Darius smiled, touched by their continued support. Thank you. That means a lot to me. How's Emily doing? Mrs. Johnson beamed. She's wonderful, growing so fast. We'll never forget what you did for her. As the Johnsons said goodbye, Darius felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had faced injustice and pain, but he had also found strength and support. He had turned a terrible situation into an opportunity for positive change. Looking around the bustling hotel lobby, Darius felt proud of what he had accomplished. The Lux Grand wasn't perfect, but it was becoming a better place for its workers and its guests. And he was an important part of that transformation. As he headed back to work, Darius held his head high. He knew there would be more challenges ahead, more work to be done, but he was ready to face whatever came next, confident in his ability to make a difference.